could go on and on, but I think I might embarrass him. Something to add?
That's what he's there for. If he starts heckling me, just.
I'll
I was asking a serious question. Were you there when it happened?
I was.
You always.
I was just a small boy.
Against the wall.
There's always one. So Tom's struggling a little bit with his voice
Yeah.
tonight,
I'll
so,
try to scream as loud as I can.
so welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you. So I'll be giving a seminar for about the next 4.5 hours, so just get comfortable. Now, I'm gonna start out with telling you, who is Jesse James? We hear a lot about them, but how did they get to be? How was the sausage made? How do we know? I'm only gonna defend Jesse probably this one time when we start. Jesse was not a good man. He was very egotistical, but I will give him this. He joined the Confederacy when he was 14 years old. So that probably changes a young boy's outlook. Most of the gang were in the Confederate Army. Jesse idolized Quantrell with Quantrell's Raiders and Bloody Bill Anderson. They were his heroes. Jesse was a killing machine. He wasn't the nice guy you think he was, or that history portrays him to be. He wasn't Robin Hood. It wasn't his goal to steal from the rich and give to the poor. He would steal from anybody and kill anybody if he had to. So I'm gonna start out with just a brief shot here. Okay. You hear so much about Jesse James, you think he was the leader of the gang. He was not. Frank was the leader. And then it would have been Cole Younger. The whole gang, they hated Jesse. Everybody hated Jesse, but they tolerated him because of their respect for Frank and Cole. So the reason they were successful in their bank robberies, they didn't just get together and decide, let's rob a bank. They used their military tactics that they were taught. They had escape routes, they had entrance routes, they had everything mapped out. They knew what they were doing, and they did it very well. Their first daytime bank robbery in US history was completed by them. They get $1.5 million in today's money. Now I'm gonna say today's money throughout this. It's about 26 times what a dollar was back then. So they walk away with $1.5 million. Throughout their career, they get about $23 to $25 million. Now, as you can imagine, nobody liked to be humiliated like that. So they brought the Pinkerton Detective Agency into it. The Pinkertons wanted these guys very badly. Their first encounter they really had with them was they went to, is there any people from Missouri here? Get them out of here. I don't want to offend you, but that's.
No, you're not bothering us a bit.
So anyway, you know all about Kearney, Missouri.
Yeah, we're from St. Joe.
The Pinkertons went in at night, and it was their intent to smoke out the James brothers. They throw a smoke bomb in the little house. These are not my words. The half-wit half-brother of Frank and Jesse picks it up and he throws it in the fireplace. It explodes. It kills him. It blows their mother's arm off. Now, Frank and Jesse, especially Jesse, they were very much mama's boys, because they'd seen men come and go, get killed. They had a lot of respect for their mother. She gets her arm blown off. Their half brother gets killed. Now they hate the Yankees. They hate the Pinkertons. They hate the railroad. They hate Wells Fargo. They hate all that. It's all a representative of the Northerners, the lifestyle they hated, the enemy. So they even come back at one point to their mother's farm and they execute most of the neighbors because they figure the neighbors turned them in to the Pinkertons. So why did they end up in Minnesota? They were all ready to go to Texas to get away from some of their calamities, and one of their guys got stopped. Mr. Hobbs gets stopped, and Mr. Hobbs here. they put it to him, up to this point, nobody knows what Frank and Jesse look like, they're just kind of ghost figures. When they talk to Mr. Hobbs, he tells them everything. How they hang out, what they do, how, so now they know everything. Mr. Hobbs gets off very lightly, but now they know what they need to know. So instead of going to Texas, they decided we better go to a safe place, Minnesota. So August of 1876, they come to Minnesota. Some have said they shipped their horses up here. Some have said they bought horses in Albert Lee. We know for a fact they didn't ride their horses. You wouldn't ride a horse that long and expect it to do what you need to do. So the month of August of 1876, they split up into pockets of 3 men. And they go around checking out banks, bars, saloons, gambling establishments. That's all they do from about St. Paul to Red Wing to Mankato. They finally decide Mankato is the bank they're gonna rob. As I just told you, Jesse has a huge ego. Every time they rob a bank, he gives all the information to a publicist. The publicist cleans it up a little bit. It comes out. Jesse's ego was so big, at one point, he's practicing this quick draw in the mirror. And he blows his little finger off. They call him Dingus from that point on, Dingus, that's what his friends call him. Could kill a man with no problem, but he wouldn't swear. He had enough respect for his mother, kill a man in cold blood, but he would not swear. So they come to Minnesota, and what did they think right away? Mankato. They go to Mankato, and as you know, around here, the church bells chime at lunch. Jesse hears that. He sees some people pointing who are like realtors. And he says, I bet they know who I am. I'm the world famous Jesse James. We can't rob the Mankato bank. So they withdraw. They go back to Northfield. They figure Northfield is an easy target. Nobody wears guns in Northfield. The men are out in the field. The men are out hunting. Easy target. So they get very compliant in their ways. They just get to the point where it's like, they're gonna make several mistakes here that they've never made in their life before. I will point to why I think why this happened that way. So they get to Northfield, they're in pockets of 2 and 3, just driving around, riding around their horses. Now they don't fit in very well because they've all got dusters on. They all have fancy horses, fancy saddles. That doesn't fit in Northfield, Minnesota. So everybody like you is kind of taking an interest. Why are these guys milling around their town? Well, what happens that day is Jesse James had one job to do. He's gonna sit at the town square. This is downtown Northfield. Here's the Cannon River. This is the bank. This is a hotel, which I'll reference. But Jesse has one job: sit on his horse and make sure that they can exit this bridge. They will cut the telegraph wire and they'll be home free. So Bob Younger, he's the youngest of all of them. Well, there, he's 20 years old. Frank James and Charlie Pitts, they sit outside the bank. Cole Younger goes down behind, comes out, and when he shows his face here, that's their sign to go in the bank. That means the whole back is clear. No, here's where their problem came in. I think, my opinion, they did something they never did before. Some of the crew did some day drinking. Northfield was a dry city, but it had 5 bars. But half of the crew decided they would go drinking that morning. I think that led to their downfall. So when they get the okay, they go in the bank. So once they go in the bank, these are the youngers. Now, Bob goes in the bank. Cole was the one that went around the back. Jim Younger's just sitting outside. Bob Younger. I'm gonna reference later, he's the most handsome of the bunch. You can't argue that probably. But at one point, I'm gonna reference this for reference too. So Charlie Pitts, he's in the bank with them. Now you notice they all got the same look to them. They're dead. It was common at that time. Wyatt Earp made it quite common. If you were killed, they'd prop you up against the wall, prop your eyes open, and people would come from miles around to point and look. There was no Samuel Wells. But because one man wanted his 15 minutes of fame, he shows up in Northfield once Mr. Pitts is down, or Mr. Miller's down, and he says, "That's my brother-in-law." It wasn't, he just wanted his little bit of fame by this, but so these three, so we had Frank, Charlie, and Bob Younger. They go in the bank. The first person they run into is Mr. Haywood. He's not the banker, he's not the assistant banker, he's just a teller. But he looks old, he looks like he's wise because he's got a beard. That's what I'm often told too by my wife. So they think he's the guy they have to press. So they start pressing him. His words were, "It's a time release safe and I can't open it even if I wanted to." That was true, but it was not locked. But he convinced them that it was locked. So I'm gonna scroll ahead a little. There's the bank, that's the front of the bank. They would have sat outside here. They rushed in there. There's the vault. If you come down and visit, this is the first year ever where citizens are allowed to go inside there. So if you ever come to Northfield, you get to go inside there. This is the same clock that was on the wall in 1876. The hands are set at 2 o'clock. The raid will start at 2 o'clock. It will last 7 minutes. It will be 7 minutes of pure hell that these guys had never encountered before. As I alluded to, they were arrogant. But the one thing they didn't think about, in the South, when they robbed a bank, the citizen didn't really care because it was a rich man's money. So they weren't gonna begin to try to stop this. They didn't plan on that. They thought the same thing would happen in the North. It would not happen. That was your money. That was your money. The people came to fight that day. So the first thing that happens is they start giving Mr. Haywood a hard time. He says, no, I can't let you in the bank. Now, mistake number one, besides the day drinking, there's a man on a horse outside. It's a hot day. The bank doors are open. A young college student is sitting over here in a rocking chair watching this all. And it's kind of curious what's going on. When the man gets off the horse, he comes and shuts the door and he doesn't go in. Now, surprise, he's got the same duster on as these three. Henry Wheeler's a smart kid. He goes and gets a gun. He goes up in the upper level of the hotel and he waits. There's a business down here, and the guy had just been in the bank. He was walking back, and he got kind of a hunch, that doesn't look right. So he walks back. Mistake number two, man on horse. He comes up to the man. He doesn't take him inside at gunpoint. He puts a gun to his head and he says, "Get out of here or I'll kill you." Now, Mr. Allen runs down the street and he yells, "Get your guns, boys, they're robbing the bank." Now, what they didn't plan on, there's 3 hardware stores downtown. Everybody has a weapon now. Some of the kids are even throwing rocks at them. So things are going really bad outside here. Cole Younger is yelling inside. We get this wrapped up, get out of here. We're getting beat up bad out here. Cole Younger, I will say, was probably the most decent man of the whole bunch. He goes up and down the streets of Northfield shooting in the air. He could have killed many people. He didn't. The only person that was killed at that time, is anybody from Faribault? Great. A young Swedish immigrant, also called the town drunk, comes out of here. He can't understand any English. He gets shot, he'll die 3 or 4 days later. See, there's the first casualty. The next casualty. Now, I'm gonna show you this, and I'm not trying to glorify this, I just want you to know this was a real event. This is a bank book. This was the ledger for that day, you can see that at the bank. This right here, that's Mr. Haywood's blood. He would die there in the bank defending the city money. So here's kind of what it looks like somewhat to this day. The museum is here, the bank is here. Mr. Wheeler would have been up here, there he is, shot. Second casualty is the horse. The horse gets killed, things are going badly. We know the horse, this is Bob Younger's saddle, it is in the museum. We know that belonged to him. The rifle that Mr. Wheeler had, that's in the museum, there's all the stuff was left there. This has been very well documented because unlike the robberies where it happened and there was many different people saying, well, I didn't see this, I didn't see it. Everybody came together. The newspaper got things transcribed right away. So if you go over to this day, you'll see this, probably the most photographed thing in town is this stairway going up. There's also a stairway going down. That was not there at this time. If you happen to go over there, you'll see 2 or 3 rings under here that are circled in black, that are bullet ricochets. I don't know it, I can attest to that one. Once this thing started getting ugly, now Frank James is getting very upset. Mr. Pitts decides he's gonna go check for himself if the vault is open. He makes a couple steps towards the vault. Henry Wheeler steps in the way. Mr. Pitts takes his gun out, racks him in the head. Mr. Wheeler falls in a pile. Now, at that time, the other banker runs for the back door. He gets shot in the shoulder. Now things are going just as ugly inside as they are outside. They're telling Frank, get out, Frank, get out of here. We're getting beat badly. Frank, in all of his frustration, Mr. Haywood gets the strength to come to his feet. Frank executes him right there. Frank, even though he was the leader of the gang, he will never suffer one consequence because of it. You'll never end up in jail, you'll never end up killed, none of that stuff. On his deathbed, Frank will tell his own grandson and Jesse's publicist, the man that killed Mr. Haywood was the man who rode the dun horse. You guys are too young to remember Gunsmoke. Matthew rode a dun horse, cream-colored horse. That is what Frank was known for. So he was in essence admitting that he had killed him. Another thing he will tell his grandson on his deathbed. After all this went down, especially in Iowa and Missouri, anybody that had a sandstone cave, they would go in there and scratch JJ on the wall and they would charge admission. There's one as close as Cannon Falls. Frank feels so strongly against that on his deathbed, he will say, we never spent a night in a cave. We had millions of dollars, but everybody wanted a piece of that. So that's got to be pretty important on your deathbed that you're gonna, that's one of the things you're gonna say, but that put that to rest. But as some of you older people know, and I've heard it 50 times in my life, I've lived in Minnesota my whole life. Everybody has a grandpa or a grandma that Frank and Jesse watered their horses at their farm. We've all heard it. Most of it's probably not true, but the fact that they milled around for a month, you would probably think back to a month and say, well, I didn't know that weird guy with the cam. It must have been Frank. And that's what your mind would do, so. Mind you, before this, they did well. They would go up to, I'm not gonna call you grandma, but they'd go up to grandma's house. And if I gave you a gold piece, you'd cook me a nice meal, treat me like royalty. They were used to that lifestyle. Until this all went southbound. So now things are going ugly for them. Mr. Haywood is dead. The one sales that come to Northfield the weekend after Labor Day and see the reenactment. If you can't get there, go on YouTube and see the outdoor reenactment. It's called The Defeat of Jesse James Days for the one reason, not to glorify Jesse James. Mr. Haywood was a hero that day. When they leave the bank, they leave with $26, the equivalent of $600 in today's money. They could have had 300,000 that was right there. But Mr. Haywood convinced them that they couldn't get into the lot, and they didn't take any of it. So he saved the town in essence, but he gave his life. Just down the road, Mr. Haywood's wife and young daughter hear all this commotion. They think it's fireworks. Because it was often the case when they had a traveling theater come to town, they would shoot off fireworks and get as much commotion as they could. That's what she's thinking. Was in fact her dad being killed. Now she would go on and get the equivalent of today's dollars, about $1 million in donations from around the world. She would get her education at Carleton. Mr. Haywood was not only the treasurer of the bank, he was the treasurer of the city, he was the treasurer of Carleton. So he paid the ultimate cost that day to save Northfield. So now Frank is executed, they go outside. There's Bob's horse is dead. Bob goes back down to the stairway I talked to you about. And there's Bob. And Mr. Allen, the guy that came down, checked the bank door out. They get in a little shootout here. Bob gets his arm all but blown off. Cole, his brother, comes and picks him up. Now I told you about Jesse. Jesse had one job to do, to make sure they leave the town square and then go and cut the telegraph wire. They couldn't do that. They had to leave this way to the south. Another problem, besides the horse laying dead, two of their gang lay dead, and one of them was the only man that knew the Minnesota Territory. So there was no plan B, so now your scouts did. They head to the south. They don't get the wire cut. But by now, a posse of 10,000 people will be working in southern Minnesota because of the telegraph. They head out. As I told you before, they're used to eating well. Now they can't go up to mom's place, grandma's place, and get food, so now they're eating anything they can. I told you Bob got his elbow almost blown off. Cole gets shot in the hip. Upon Cole's death, they find 21 bullets in his body. Jim Younger, upon his death, they find 17 bullets in his body. He just didn't get shot up in a shootout and go to the doctor and say, well, I got this, got this here to have you get out. Now, once they took off to the south, it's been very hot. It starts raining. It will rain for 14 days. Now, they're plow horses. They're half blind. I don't know much about a horse, but from what I've been told, they'll go about 12 or 15 miles without water. Thus why you see towns around Minnesota spaced how they are because of the horse traffic. I do believe this. What Hollywood tried to tell you about this was that the horse went through a plate glass window. The horses are a heck of a lot smarter than this. And I can guarantee you, out in the Dakotas, they didn't jump a 28-foot gorge. Didn't happen. But Hollywood had to make this story presentable. So they played the Robin Hood factor. Every movie you're gonna watch about Jesse James is about 10% true. Every book you're gonna read is about 10% true. So if you read them all, you might think you know what's going on, like I thought I did. And then I went through 7 weeks of training just to find out about the Northfield experience. But most of what you know about Jesse James is not true. I don't think any of you are childbearing age, but don't name your kid Jesse James, please. You like today calling your kid Jeffrey Dahmer, don't do it. It might be cute if you're building motorcycles, but if you know the history of Jesse, like I say, he was a hated man. So what happens? They take off here. They're starving. It's raining. They have infection. They get about a week out. This will be about a 70-mile trek they'll take down the Medulla. They get about halfway there. So they're 7 days out. Frank and Jesse have this good idea. I think we'll just leave you guys, being you're hurt and slowing us down. Frank and Jesse leave. They go to the Dakotas. I'll deal with them later. The rest of the guys go down. They go down in the Hanska Slough. McGill is about 70 miles from Northfield. So they've trekked this in about 14 days. They almost got caught in Blue Earth. They didn't. They get down there. All they want to do is lay low and heal. Till a young teenage boy comes along and he says, Dad, I seen them down at the Hanska Slough. Dad, like any farmer, says, no, get to work and go milk the cows. He didn't believe his son. The next day he sees them again. He goes, Dad, I seen them. Now I'm gonna tell you about toe prints in the mud. He sees like barefoot toe marks in the mud. And I'll reference that in a little bit. So they're down in the Hanska Slough. So it's the 3 younger brothers and Charlie Pitts. There's 4 of them down there. Now, as I told you, Bob's elbow's all but off. Cole's been shot already. They just want to lay down. So young Sorbo boy, he goes and gets the sheriff. He brings a posse out there, and then what's the sheriff's one request? Don't shoot. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. What do? They shoot. Once they start shooting it, they're shooting. So now what we have, Bob Younger gets hit in the lung. He will die in prison from the effects of getting hit in the lung. Mr. Pitts will be killed. Now, this is not a picture I want to, I say there's Bob's saddle. Now, Jim Younger will get shot in the jaw down the slough. He will never eat solid food again. Cole Younger, not so much in this picture. He takes a bullet behind the eye. Many of the pictures you'll see his eye is puffed up. Bob Younger takes a shot to the lung. So the only ones that are still alive besides Frank and Jesse are the Youngers. No. Mr. Pitts, I'm gonna leave a picture up here for you guys, and I don't want, if you want to look at it, you look at it. I'm gonna leave it face down. Mr. Pitts does not have a left ear, that picture. Because when he was killed, somebody harvested his ear. The reason I know that, I've seen the ear and I've got pictures of it right here. It was on display for many years in Northfield. It was just too morbid. They put it away. Of course, I'm an old wastewater guy, so I gotta see that picture. Bring that ear out. So over a beer, we bring that ear out and we're looking at it, and I took a picture of it. But like I said, if you don't want to see it, it looks like parchment paper. That's what I thought it was, an old ear with parchment paper. No, it was ear and flesh off the neck and shoulder. but everybody wanted part of this. Now, I told you the two bad guys that were killed in the street. Mr. Wheeler, the college student, he comes to the sheriff and he says, "Can I have those bodies?" The sheriff says, "Absolutely not. But we will bury them shallow tonight in the Northfield Cemetery." And they harvest those bodies and they put them in formaldehyde. And Mr. Wheeler knows there's a shortage of cadaver bodies. He's a medical student. They ship them out to Michigan. To this day, we know that one of those bodies hangs in a medical center because they did DNA on it. The other body, Mr. Miller's brother, came and he got the barrel. He takes it up to Lake Calhoun. For some reason, it ends up on the lake, falls through this ice in the spring. They think they have a serial killer. It's not, it's his bones from the cadaver body that was taken to Michigan. Now, in their little month of having fun in Minnesota, they hit all the brothels and all the gambling establishments in St. Paul. They met one guy. Now, this is hearsay, but when they left Northfield, Minnesota, they should have went south and stayed in the big woods undercover. They would have been probably fine. They didn't. They ended up going out in the open plain. Why? The story goes that bar owner had fresh horses waiting for them out here. That makes sense to me, because these guys are smarter than, I gotta believe anybody. I wanna be under cover of trees if I'm gonna run from somebody. That is part of the story. All these people in St. Paul, they remembered the James Younger boys because they got drunk one night and they started flipping silver or gold, silver dollars off the balconies. That's the equivalent of $26. You'd probably remember it too if that happened outside here tonight. If Rusty Arness here starts showing silver dollars, which he often does. He's a farmer. They remembered that. So everybody in St. Paul remembered. Now you have to remember, everybody in the South thought these guys were heroes. It was the railroad's fault. It was the Union Army's fault. They made these guys, to some extent, maybe so, but not Cole Younger. He was a smart individual. He was an officer in the Civil War. So these guys had never had their pictures taken. They got kind of crazy in St. Paul. People started remembering. To this point, nobody knew what they looked like, really. Now all of a sudden, wanted posters start coming out with their pictures on them. If you ever go on eBay and find a wanted poster with their pictures on it, don't spend $30,000 because I guarantee you it's a fake. There was just as many corrupt people around then. To this day, there are thousands and thousands of Jesse James guns floating around. Take an old gun, bury it in the sand for a few months, dig it up, find some sucker, tin type pictures. I'm part of Jesse James gang group on Facebook. The James family will argue with me to the death that Frank and Jesse were good, God-fearing Christians. They read the Bible and never hurt anybody. They never killed anybody that didn't have to be killed. But they still believe that because Mima taught them that these guys were heroes. They weren't heroes. The only good story I'll tell you about Jesse, the story goes, and I'm going to say you're crying, you're about to lose the farm. Jesse comes to you and says, "What's the matter? I need $8,000 to keep the farm." Jesse says, "Here's $8,000, ma'am. Sign the paperwork, cross all the T's, dot all the I's." She does. Jesse robs the banker on the way back to town. But that's the only redeeming story about Jesse. So otherwise, Jesse was not. Some of Jesse's friends were practical serial killers in today's. One of them cut his stepdad's throat while he slept, one of Jesse's best friends. So these are not good people at all. So now we had the Younger brothers. They brought them into Rice County, Faribault, Minnesota. As I showed you, Bob Younger, I pointed out to you that he was handsome. Sure. Bob is a handsome one, which is, I don't know, you decide for yourself. But he is 20 years old, tall and handsome. He goes to Fairville. They bring him into Fairville. He has groupies of young women. They're bringing flowers for him. People were just as bad back then as they are today. You just didn't go on the internet and see it all the time. So they bring them into Faribault. They have one thing they can do, and that's plead guilty. Because if they go to trial and they're found guilty, they'll hang. They know that. So they propose to them, okay, you plead guilty and we'll give you life in prison. So that's what they end up, was life in prison. You can pass these around. These aren't the morbid pictures. But I have some pictures here. And here we go. They go to Cole Younger. The sheriff asks him, he says, you tell me by morning who killed Mr. Haywood, and this will go a lot easier for you. So this is what his response was. And I'll give you, you can just pass it down. That's Cole's actual handwriting. He said, be true to your friends if the heavens fall. That was Cole's answer to say, I'm not giving anybody up. I think this is one of the most important artifacts in the museum. We have Cole Younger's shackles from Stillwater Prison. We have crafts that were made. So when they went to Stillwater Prison, well, first I'll go to the last casualty we have. They're found guilty, or the guilty. That night, a officer is patrolling the Rice County Courthouse. He gets shot and killed by friendly fire. Somebody thought he was there to break these guys out, so he was shot and killed. Even right now, the officers loved Cole Younger. They got along really well with all of them. They are so well liked, they get sent to Stillwater Prison for a life sentence. After a few years, the prison catches fire. Now the warden respects the Youngers so well, he arms them. When the prison catches fire, he arms all three of them and says, watch my wife and watch the 12 female inmates while we go fight the fire. So that's how well respected they were. At one time, their sister comes into the picture. They let them do a family portrait in the prison, which I have to believe is pretty hard to get, but that's how well respected Cole was. Cole is to be 70, early 70s. That was very, very old back then, especially for somebody that killed and maimed and went through war. But by that time, most people had rickets at 35 and their teeth were all gone. So 72 was quite old. Frank James will live to be in his early 70s as well. Frank James, will, as I said, will never suffer a consequence because of what he did. So what did he do? As I told you, Frank and Jesse, they take off for the Dakotas. They jump a 20-foot to 28-foot gorge, which Hollywood shows you. They circle back down to Missouri. Jesse picks up his wife and kids. Now, I don't condone this, but his wife was his first cousin. Maybe a regional thing, but picks them up. They go to Tennessee and they lay low. They have aliases. And then they finally go back to Missouri. Now, the James Younger gang would morph from 5 to 13 people. And they were always bringing some guy in. Well, they brought one. I'm just going to pick on you, sir, just to get the fun. This Bob Ford, they didn't like Bob Ford. Nobody liked Bob. Jesse and Frank's mother goes to Bob and said, Bob, would you ever hurt my Jesse? Bob says, no, I won't hurt Jesse. That fateful day, Jesse James has got a gun belt on, and it always has 7 to 10 pistols at any given time. Takes it off. And he sets it down. And I would have to wonder, what's that all about? The one man I can't trust. Now, if I'm gonna play Dr. Phil here for a moment, I think Jesse was tired of running. He knew how this was gonna end when he turned his back on Bob Ford. Bob Ford takes the opportunity, take a gun. Jesse straight in the picture, just what I would do if my enemy was behind me. And he gets shot in the head. Jesse's dead. Bob Ford thinks he's gonna be famous. He's gonna get $5,000. He gets hardly anything. He's gonna be famous. Oh, he's not famous at all. They write songs about the coward Bob Ford killed our hero. And there's even a movie to the fact that. So Bob Ford has a miserable existence. Jesse's dead. They take Jesse back to Kearney, Missouri, and they bury him. Who comes back to life? Ma and Frank. They come down there, they have like a little dog and pony show. They put fresh rocks on Jesse's grave every night, and then the next day they sell them to tourists. After a while, they start thinking Jesse's body is probably gonna be stolen. So they take that body off site. They continue this game. Now, when the Youngers got out of prison, I told you Bob died in prison. Jim and Cole get out there in their 50s. They can't leave Minnesota, they can't ever marry, and they can't ever make any money off of their name. Jim Younger, as I told you, has never eaten solid food again. He suffers from depression. He's institutionalized. This is a whole different world than when they went into prison. He goes to the Wabasha Motel in St. Paul. He commits suicide. Finally, Cole Younger is allowed to leave Minnesota. He goes on to ride with the Wild West shows. Buffalo Bill Cody, Annie Oakley, Cole Younger. Frank James would even come to the picture at times and sit in the corner. He couldn't make money, but that doesn't mean he couldn't sit there and say, oh, that's Frank James right there. So Frank James will never suffer any consequences. I have heard he ran for like county commissioner, which is probably right, you know. Got a life of crime, run for a. So he comes on, well, I've even heard he was a minister, Baptist minister towards the end of his life. More power to him. Now in early 1900s, a guy comes out of the woodwork. And he says, I am Jesse James and I never died that day. Oh, that's huge. There's stories written, books written. Could you imagine if I came out and told you, well, Elvis was living down a quick trip all these years, the Prince is still alive. It was huge. Back in the 80s, the James family exhumed Jesse's body just to prove that that wasn't true. Jesse did die that day. They could tell by the DNA. They could tell by the bullets, the scarring on Jesse. That was Jesse who died that day. So that was all a hoax. But as I told you before, everybody wanted part of this hoax. Whether it was just the bank never operated again the way it could be. Because I could only imagine if you had this bank where all this happened, everybody and their brothers would come in there and just stand there. Can I help you, sir? No, I'm just here to look. They eventually move it where the museum is. They eventually move it across the street, bank. So to this day, the bank is still there. Some weird tidbits. When they decided on Northfield, Minnesota, there was the Ames Mill. Means nothing to any of you until I say the Ames Mill later became Multi-Mill and now Post Cereal. Now, Mr. Ames, after the Civil War, was appointed to be the governor of the Mississippi Territory. You can bet that it set well with Frank and Jesse. So if they had to decide between Cannon Falls, Northfield, let's go for Northfield because we're gonna get some of Mr. Ames' money. So that was probably the defining factor why they came back to that. A little bit more, I've got 3 hours left, so I'm at the really pace this morning. If any of you are familiar with Dundas, Minnesota, just 1,300 people, a couple bars. Well, back in the heyday, the Archibald family had a Dundas, Ontario, and they wanted to replicate this city, so they came to Minnesota and they replicated it. It was a flour mining city. They had the Cannon River. They ground flour with not stone, but rollers. It was the finest ground flour in all the world. Because of this, they could get $6 more a barrel. Well, at 26 bucks a dollar, that's a lot of money. They were pretty proud of that until General Mills came and stole that idea. Now the river's starting to drain down. If you go to Dundas today, you can see the ruins of the mill. You have a fence around it. You can see what's left of the mill. A lot of what happened, like I say, if you just start thinking back something I told you, it was pure arrogance why this happened. The most famous gunfighters in history met their Waterloo because of arrogance or because a couple of guys had to have a couple of beers. So I'll leave you with that. Don't understand, it's easier for kids. Some of you aren't kids, but don't underestimate your enemy. You never know, you never know. And for God's sakes, Russell, don't drink before you rob a bank. In my lifetime of living in Northfield, 2 people have came in the broad of daylight trying to rob the bank downtown. For God's sakes, if karma doesn't get you, I mean, that's the last place I'd want to rob a bank, but I'd invite you all to come check this all out. We have a heck of a car show the weekend after Labor Day on a Saturday. They have the shootouts about every 3 hours in the street. It is very interesting to watch those horses. They love that. And when they get there, they start prancing and dancing because they know what's going to happen. People think, well, a horse will be afraid of that. These horses are conditioned to that and they love it. And the guys that do it love it. They love it so good you can't even hardly get your foot in the door to be one of those guys. So that's why I'm the guy inside here that does inside tours and looks out the window. But if you've got any questions, comments, no heckling, no jokes.
How fast was, as far as gunslingers, who was maybe the fastest draw and
I would say Cole Younger
goal?
was probably Jesse probably thought he was up here, but just the fact you've got 10 pistols on your belt makes me think you're not really too sure of yourself. You have only a couple, but it's a lot of weight to carry around, even small pistols, But
And they were,
if you've ever seen the Dusters in Minnesota would not, they would stand out. You don't need a Duster in Northfield, Minnesota. And White Elite guys have the same one. So they're really, they were just asking for trouble in my eyes that this happened, but there are a lot of good books you'll read. And I think until you've read about half of them, you won't really try to put this puzzle together. And if you want to expand out further, there's a lot of interesting tales of the Civil War that tie into this. Now, in their defense, I'm gonna tell you, war is hell. We all know that. You got a 14-year-old boy doing your business for you. But towards the end of the war, the Northern troops were told to drive these people out of their homes. Why? Just to drive them out of their homes. What they were actually doing, some of them were robbing them and stockpiling that to have money when the war came to an end. They went to the Younger's mother. And then, you had kids for 40 years back then, so they've got younger siblings. And they go to the younger Youngers and the younger mother, and they make her burn her own house down. Now, how happy are these guys gonna be about the Northern troops? You made my mom burn her own house down in front of the kids. So there was a lot of atrocities. But I tell younger people, and I'm not gonna get political with this, but we have to learn from history. We can't whitewash it. We have to realize bad things happened. And if we keep burying them under the rug, they'll keep happening. They'll pop up again. We have to learn these lessons. So I'm a big advocate for tell the truth. It was ugly. There was bad people. There was bad people all the way on both sides of the game. But it's just proof right here how, you know, how things can get ugly and some people think they're the greatest people ever. I will say this, when Quantrell's Raiders, when they went into Lawrence, Kansas one day and they killed 160 boys and men, now the South didn't really think they were the golden children that they thought they were. You just went in there and slaughtered 160 men and boys. So that kind of took tarnished their reputation a lot, but there's still people that say they'll say that the James Youngers were the biggest and the baddest, and as they killed anywhere from 18 to 25 people. And the James family will say they only killed who had to be. Well, what does that mean? If you've got your life savings, you're on a train and I try to take it from you, you say no and I kill you, is that deserving of being killed? No. But like I say, the Pinkertons kind of thrived because of this. One more piece of tidbit down the street here. When all this happened was the Archer House. It was a very nice motel. You had two colleges, you had all the traffic of this coming into town. About 4 years ago, it caught fire, burned to the ground. So now there's just an empty hole. They'll be rebuilding it, but it won't be rebuilt like what it was. It was a beautiful hotel. Why anybody decided to put a barbecue joint right in the middle of this tinder box that was 150 years old, I don't know, but. So if you get to downtown Northfield, you'll see that. Check out Dundas. We're trying to eventually assemble a tour. It'll be a bus tour. It would go through the whole route. There's a whole story about this too, but I don't know that well enough to tell you. If you get a chance, go to Stillwater, go to the warden's house. I went through their tour, they've went through our tour, so we kind of know what we're talking about. Cole Younger was quite a craftsman, and if you go to the museum in Northfield, he's made all these little nice jewelry boxes, and we have them there. But I suppose you might as well be good if you're gonna sit there for what you think the rest of your life, you might as well build something that's gonna last, so they would put together these little doohickeys, and so that's pretty much, yes, sir.
If it was possible to try Jesse James today for the raid, would he be convicted? Nobody the Youngers always claimed he wasn't there.
Yeah,
He wasn't known in Northfield.
Yeah.
Was there anybody that could say, I believe it was definitely him, but was there anybody there that could say that was him?
I believe there would have been many people that saw him face to face. The unfortunate thing that happened, there was a lot of phantom bank robberies where they tried to pin it on them, you know, so. Did they actually rob 25 banks or was it somebody a copycat? Would have been a great time to, now, to go in the broad daylight was a new thing for them, but then maybe somebody else says, well, but Frank and Jesse got with it, let's try it and we'll pin it on them. The Pinkertons, I have to believe, they knew what they're up against, but you'll see one movie where they're lying on the roofs of Northfield waiting. There was not one Pinkerton person to tell them, so that's all lies. So, yes, sir.
You said that Jesse came back and executed their mother's neighbors?
Yeah, Jesse and Frank came back and executed the neighbors because they believed they narked them out.
Never heard
Told
of
them that
them
they were gonna be there, and that's how mom got her arm blown off,
What was that?
and that's how the little brother, half-wit brother got killed. I believe he was like 12 years old, but he died because he picked this smoke bomb through the fireplace. And
before.
it
They said they
exploded.
came back and executed.
They
the
came back
neighbor.
after the fact and just
neighbor.
went systematically down, started executing people.
That was in Missouri.
Where was that? What town was that?
Occurring, Missouri, when you're going on I-35, what is it? 15 miles off? Not very far, no, you'll see a sign that says Kearney. The whole place is there. They've probably beefed it up through the years a little bit. Jesse's grave is there. there's a spot in the wall. I told you how Jesse got shot. There's a spot in the wall, and I've seen it on pictures. It's been picked at so much it's this big. 'Cause people keep sticking their fists. Everybody wants to touch that saddle I showed you. Up until 3 years ago, there was no glass case on there. One day, a portly old guy like me decides he's gonna take a photo op and sit on that saddle. Our cameras caught it, and now we have a glass case on it, but people all wanna touch, and you can only imagine if, 100,000 people touch something with their oily skin. I have heard it's the second biggest draw in Minnesota, next to the State Fair, the Mall of America. I don't think I believe that at all. But there are a lot of people that come. I have talked to people in Northfield that don't even know the story. I have talked to guys for 4 hours from Australia that they can't get enough of it, or from Canada. Guys our age, I'll look at some our age. This was part of what you grew up on, you know, that was part of the shoot 'em up, John Wayne, good guy, white hat, black hat kind of thing, so you kind of have a feel for that and you really want to know. And if you're like me, you sat through school and thought you're gonna be a comedian, instead you didn't, you got old and fat, playing enough of football. So now you think, oh, why didn't I listen to my teacher? So I don't think there's any of you still in class, I won't give you that lecture. But,
Aren't those tours all year round?
no, it,
'Cause I
once,
took my students about 30 years ago up there.
once Jesse James stays, comes and goes, they're by appointment only, because we just can't get the staff. I'm one of about 8 adults that do it.
They reenacted, they had the people and the dresses and everything.
Yeah, they do that during that weekend.
They did this in the school year and we took. the
Yeah,
kids
no,
up
we-
there
We have a, imagine,
30 years ago.
I'm sitting with a class of 8th grade girls, and I'm the only man grown up in there for 7 weeks to hear this course. Now, they let them do the tours during the week, and then they let a seasoned veteran do it during the weekend, so right now they're not going on, but if you call, any of you call the museum, if you like, if you're gonna go on Yelp, give me 2 stars. My name is Russell.
Yeah.
But if you like, my name is Tom. If you ever wanna call the museum and say, hey, I'm bringing the 6 of my buddies over there, can you have time down at 10 o'clock? I can do it till I go to Arizona and winter in Arizona, but that's what I'd suggest, because right now they don't run them. I'll get a tour. Tomorrow I've got a tour of dignitaries. But it's usually senior citizens. I'll bring a bus of 50 and I'll bring them through half and half. But yeah, come anytime. They're open all weekend on
I
Saturdays.
don't think the museum was open there 30 years ago. I don't remember going to the museum.
Yeah, no,
The bank, we went to the bank.
well, see, and actually, when the bank, that sat idle for years. And in 1976, the Historical Society bought that building, which used to be a mini mall. And then all of a sudden, the real clock and everything came back in the picture because people wanted it to be back. So the bank, for the most part, as you see it today, is exactly how it was in 1870. Oh, I didn't allude to the toes in the mud. These guys had been riding for 14 days in the rain. When they get them into Faribault, the Rice County Courthouse, they take their boots off and all their toenails come off with the boot. They've been walking on with no soles, it rotted off. So not only were they hungry, they're infected, they didn't really have any boots left, they're riding blind horses. They had this was not the life they chose. I know you all know who Evel Knievel is. I was told that these guys could do on a horse what Evel Knievel could do on a motorcycle. I have tried riding a horse at full gallop. I can guarantee you, I would probably shoot 2 of you out of the crowd, so what John Wayne taught us, that doesn't happen on a moving horse, that doesn't happen like that. But Jesse had to do this to survive, so he could go under a horse's neck and shoot as he went. He was good at that. He had to be good at that, so. And that's why they like the good horses. They like to buy the good horses. They like the fancy horses. They like the smart horses, so that's why they are the best horses, so. Yes, ma'am.
I just have one question from one of our Zoom people. I think maybe you answered this, but did they move Jesse James's body?
It's, to my knowledge, it's back Kearney now. They moved it back.
Okay.
But for a while there, they were fearful that it was gonna get pilfered. So they did bring it back.
Thank you.
What kind of a father did the James boys have?
Well, they had, I can't elaborate a lot on it, but there were, I think for the most part, pretty good men. One of them went out to California for work. I think he got killed. And then there was his stepdad. I think he maybe got sick and died. And then there was actually 3 men. So they kind of gravitated towards mom. So they respected mom. So when mom got her arm blown off, that hit Jesse and Frank hard. So, that, like I said, I can't elaborate, but yeah, I think one of them was a minister. But there's just, I think a lot of it was Civil War. Now, it said, even though I told you this was 1876, it said this was the last battle of the Civil War. And many of you are gonna say that's not right because the Civil War ended in 1865. It never ended in Jesse's head. It raged in his head. And this was in fact the last battle of the Civil War, because you've seen that come out, why Mr. Haywood was killed, why this all happened, because he still hated the Yankees. So, yes.
He has a question.
And this may be, one of the many rumors, I don't want to even ask it and add substance to it, but I did read or hear that the James gang, as they came through Minnesota looking for places to rob, came through Rochester and considered that. Have you ever heard anything in that?
It very well could. The towns I hear are Mankato, St. Paul, Cannon Falls. I heard of buying horses in Albert Lee. I don't know if Rochester would have been too big.
Well, maybe they found the game.
I don't think they would have been comfortable with that big of a city. At that time, it was probably not huge, but it was a lot bigger than, say, a Cannon Falls. That's my speculation.
We had a couple experts in the audience, Dr.
Oh, then I'm leaving.
Any thoughts on him being in Rochester?
Do what?
In Rochester, there are 2 different sets of sandstone gates, both of which were carved out after the James came about 18.
Now, what's the other expert? So I can single them out.
Point out Lee over there is probably.
Great, you're an expert.
We couldn't hear his comments.
If it scares you,
There's 2 sets of
She called me
sandstone
an
caves in
expert.
Rochester,
No,
and they always get the story that they were there. The fact is that both of these caves were dug out 20 years after they had died.
Yeah, got it.
But it never stops.
yeah.
But there is a story about one of those caves. And horse thieves and stuff, so. Yeah, different horse thieves.
Well, they get their money, they carry with them, watch the video.
They spent their money. I mean, you gotta remember, there was 13 of them. There was a lot of kids, a lot of wives, a lot of late night drinking. They like to gamble too, so. I suppose,
Makes more money then.
25 million sounds like a lot, but I suppose when you split it amongst 13 men, 13 wives, 40 kids, it probably goes away for, and you probably had to bury that, and there's probably still money buried somewhere on your farm.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So, corn, but not this year.
Yeah.
Did you ever role play Jesse James?
No,
Come on. It's clear you shot your own finger off.
I show that to little kids and they're like, oh, cool, this is what I did for you. No, I tell you, I live in Mesa, Arizona. And they want me to be a gunfighter in the abandoned gold mine. Now, I can't see myself dressing up in a lot of clothes on a hot day, getting shot 4 or 5 times and have to fall. I'm not built like that. So you do that 12 times over a weekend, I don't. I would love to be in the outside story. But like I say, these guys are horsemen. They know horses. I'll give them that. I'll just be the best I can be inside. And everybody's, of the 8 adults that do it, everybody's just getting kind of not tired of it, but they've been it for years. I'm just fresh. I've only been doing it for 4 years, so.
Are the ones that do that from Northfield, or are they from?
Mostly, yeah. And you pretty much have to be grandfathered in. Because of course, if I'm Jesse, I want my grandson to be the next Jesse. So that's,
There's an interesting thing. We went to Kearney, Missouri, but we went not for Jesse James. We didn't even think about that. We went for the Pony Express. That was the beginnings of the
St.
Pony
Joseph,
Express.
yeah.
okay.
And the hotel was there. Of course, that was.
That's St. Joseph.
Or St. Joseph, okay. But, and they went through a tremendous deal to restore the stables, because that was just, we didn't care about it. It went away and it
Yeah.
was rotted away. But the house where he was killed.
Yeah.
They saved that. That's
Yeah.
exactly the way it is the day
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
killed, and they moved it right to the center of town at the hotel.
Yeah.
So that was, and all that happened at the same time, basically, within about 4 years' time. They saved the house and the heck with the Pony
Yeah.
Express, that didn't mean anything to them.
And don't quote me on this, but I believe every year they have an actual shootout in Medelia, a reenactment. That I don't know. And that's why I wanna drive the bus,
Yeah.
like a Peterman's reality tour, and take people down there.
You came all the way.
We'll stop and have a beer and a burger.
We can
Where's
provide-
Bedelia? I don't.
Medelia's in Minnesota, it's down by, down 70 miles from, you know.
Were they ever considered the James gang, or was it always considered, Cole Younger gang?
I don't think they like to put a title on themselves because,
It seems like as a kid, I can remember, they're the James gang.
they like to be in the shadows, so I don't think, that's why when you see pictures of them, very few of them are true because they didn't post their pictures. If you got a camera, I'm not gonna say, except for Jesse, because his ego was so big, but I think he even knew better not to post your pictures, because he knew what that meant. Now we know you're 6'2" and, you know, before we thought.
You
you
hear
were
somebody say
5'6".
James gang, they probably don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay, did they ever rob trains, or was it just?
oh yeah, trains,
Trains and.
stagecoaches and banks. And that's why Wells Fargo got involved. And that's where the Pinkertons,
You reckon you never crossed trails with a bit of the kid?
they say they have, I do not know, I don't know much about Billy the Kid, not to say.
Mexico.
I don't know. I
He got shot in the back by Pat Garrett.
It's like anybody, they've all met each other when they met your grandma. One of the two, but, I have to be, I usually don't tell you folks facts until I like triple checked it. To make sure that it's not some grandma telling a story out of school.
I still don't understand why Frank James didn't get arrested and.
He went into jail. I went in the sheriff's office, they questioned him about another murder, and it never stuck to him. That's as far as it ever got. And, nobody knew, they wanted so badly to find out who shot Mr. Haywood. That's why the sheriff said that, and that's why Cole's response was, you know, I won't tell you. Cause until then, you can't, if you could pinpoint somebody, and if you would have said Frank did it, Frank would have went to trial. But when everybody said, no, Frank wasn't even there, Jesse wasn't there, Jesse was down in Hawaii, at the time, you know. So I think,
Wasn't, didn't they try to extradite Frank from Missouri, but the governor went to go for it now?
that I don't know, I know the governor of Tennessee,
I see the ear.
yeah. You're gonna have a lot of nightmares about this, you people are just as morbid as I thought you were. No. The ear actually looks like a piece of, jerky,
Yeah, it doesn't look like anything.
but if you notice the whole thing that I thought was parchment is not, it's
It's a skin.
it's a part of the shoulder and neck.
Yeah.
That's the ear. That's the story, and I was, sitting in the basement. And as you can imagine, just like you probably got a ear, 5 year stuff. They do too. There's all kinds of guns, you know, there's all kinds of things that people have donated that are in the basement in Northfield.
If anyone has a specific question and would like to talk to Tom, I'd probably entertain a few more questions, but otherwise, I just want to thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the lecture.
If you wanna hang on and, talk for 3 more hours about football. I'm the event manager for Tommy Kramer, retired Viking. So if you got any questions about Tommy or about Russ Garner, I know more about Russ than like this.
Thank you. Yeah. You'd be surprised how people do not know who Tommy Kramer is, these younger generations.
Oh, yeah.
I talked to, you
Where
know,
are you from with that?
what Tommy. They just don't know.
Friends with me.
Well, I heard a paper.